Memorable leaders of nonprofit organizations have certain traits that we must understand, and these are generally aspects of ourselves that we are born with. And while no one embodies all of these traits, it is important to identify which ones apply to us as individual leaders. Now, my guest and author, Theresa Ricke-Kiely, will reveal the traits we need to deliver the best leaders we can be in her new book, The Path to Mindful Leadership: Practices for Nonprofit Success. And as a bonus for watching this, we're going to be offering a QR code to access the first chapter of her book, which we will cover in this three-part series today. Just go to the link below and download it. And if you want to order the book, there's a link for that as well. We want you to be successful leading your nonprofit. And to do that, we offer the Nonprofit Docs videos for free. We're not selling anything. In exchange, we would appreciate if you would just like and subscribe to our channel and view our videos all the way through, as it is what keeps our videos coming. But only subscribe if you consider yourself a nonprofit professional who wants to change the world for the better. If you're committed, because that's what we do here, we give you the tools and knowledge to make the world a better place. And most importantly, we want your feedback. We want your comments because we want to know what your challenges are so that we can help you with them. Now, let's get started with part 2 of 3 of the Path to Mindful Leadership with Dr. Theresa Ricke-Kiely. What are the traits of good leaders? And so, Theresa, I'm going to hand that back to you, and I'm going to ask you that question. What kind of traits do we have to be really good, mindful leaders?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Maybe I should first define what leadership traits are. Those
Okay.
are things that you are born with. They're not easily changed. Some of them, you can improve upon, but they're not easily changed. So most of us are born either being an introvert or an extrovert. Maybe you're an ambivert, but you're usually one or the other. And yes, you can try to practice how, if you're an extrovert, how to pull that back, but that's not easy, Mark, is it?
No, it's not.
And
No.
just like for the introverts, it is really difficult to kind of put a show on and to work a room. It's just difficult. So these are things that you're born with. And in the book, I certainly don't name them all, but I gave you in chapter 1 a good splattering of what traits might be. We can think about approachability. We could think about friendliness, flexibility, integrity, intelligence. Those are the types of things that I'm talking about when I talk about leadership traits. So, what do we need for mindful leadership? I would say that many traits work hand in hand, but it really depends on the person. I would say for any good leader, you want to make sure that you have integrity. That's something that you either have or you don't. And it doesn't matter if you're a business leader, a government leader, a mindful leader, a nonprofit leader, those types of things, you really need to have the respect and the trust of your team, your organization, your community. So I would say that it again is very situational. It really depends what you bring to your team. I happen to be an introvert. I have done a lot of practice to be extroverted when I need to be. But boy, it's exhausting at the end of the night. So it's not that I can't do it; it just doesn't come naturally to me. So those are the types of things I'm thinking about when I think about leadership traits and leadership.
When we talk about when you're talking about integrity, that's something that you kind of build over a period of time, though, isn't it? But what you're talking about is innately, you have to be a trustworthy person.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, what other traits should we be looking at here and thinking about?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to mindful leadership, empathy is one that pops up all the time. Again, you can learn how to say things that are empathetic, but it doesn't always come off as authentic. How are you doing today, Mark? you know, you can tell when somebody really cares about you and they are concerned about a situation that you just dealt with or that you're dealing with. Empathy is something that, as I've been teaching many young people for many years now, they really want and expect. And I think that the game amped up with empathy when we had the COVID pandemic. People really were struggling through that and expected a lot of empathy. Those organizations that could be flexible, those leaders who understood what people were going through did much better during that pandemic than those that didn't. So when I was leading a academic team that worked with the nonprofit community in St. Paul, Minnesota, I made sure that those extroverts were able to connect with the team in different ways when we couldn't go into work every day. That was really important to them. The introverts, on the other hand, were like, I don't need to go to another meeting. I'm perfectly fine working at home. And then when we came back to work, I had to worry about, okay, well, how are they going to be reintroduced to, the work, which was going to be a little more extroverted. We worked with students, we worked with faculty, we worked with staff, we worked with community. So we had to figure out plans so that people could re-enter the workforce and their needs were still met. So that would be one example of a mindful leader thinking about their team and their needs and being very intentional about how to manage that so people felt safe. And if you remember in the pandemic, safe meant a very different thing than we were just talking a little bit ago about psychological safety. Many of us were worried about our physical health. We have people who have autoimmune diseases and especially before the vaccines, people were concerned about how they were going to stay safe, physically safe. So all of those things the mindful leader needs to think about in meeting needs. And it's a huge burden to think about. I can't just think about myself. I need to think about the team, and my needs may be very different from your needs. Mindful leaders need to really think about that.
And during the pandemic, I think one of the issues was people were not around each other anymore. And as a result, there was this stress of not being around people. I mean, you didn't have a sense of community. And I would think too, coming back from that was stressful because now you have to reintegrate as a community and being empathetic to that. I don't know how you deal with that. I mean, I guess I didn't have to do that because I retired during the pandemic. So I think that you're right. That is tough. And being empathetic, sometimes I think that's an inherited trait, but are you saying that we can learn that?
So you can learn how to ask certain questions so that you at least are in a learning mode. I think empathy is something that comes naturally to a lot of people. So it's not that you can't learn it. You can certainly learn some things, but for most of us, it's something that we are born with and it's natural to us.
Yeah.
So you can improve it, but it's not like learning other types of tasks that you can't learn.
So what else do we need to know?
I would say in today's, especially as we go through the throes of different policies being changed or eliminated, funding sources being eradicated, we really need to think about how we have compassion for our team and our organizations and our community. I'm not sure about what's happening in Michigan right now, but I can tell you in Arizona, we're experiencing a lot of layoffs and understanding that a lot of people, when that happens, people now don't have that net of people around you to connect to. They don't have an organization that they relate to anymore. They don't have a position that they can say, this is what I do. And having compassion and understanding is another mindful trait. So what do we need to do when people are suffering in ways that we may not have anything to do with, but we feel are important to their health? I was working with an organization recently where they experienced layoffs and the executive team took a cut in pay. And as I was reading this in the report, I asked the executive director, how are you feeling? Because you've been hit in a couple of different ways. Your team is now not the team that you had. Now people are going to have to do extra work. You have a team that is now frightened because the financial situation may not get better with everything that's happening today. Salaries were cut. How are you feeling? And this person was very touched that I would even ask that question because no one had asked that of her before. So understanding and being compassionate when people are going through things and reaching out is really important. And I don't think that happens enough in the nonprofit sector. People are kind of seen as, okay, you were laid off. I'm just going to, not have anything to do with you. And I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think that's when people need you most. And if you're mindful, you're going to reach out and say, what can I do to help you network? Is there anybody on my LinkedIn profile that you would like to meet with? Can I look over your resume? Can I, get you a volunteer opportunity? Having that compassion and reaching out is really what a mindful leader does.
And that's not just being compassionate about what's happening on the job. There used to be a belief system in the old leadership strategies that said, keep your personal problems at home and keep your work
Yeah.
problems at work, right? We know
Yeah.
as human beings it doesn't work that way. And I have to tell you, one of the most memorable things that a leader I have worked with ever did was my stepfather passed away several years ago. So, of course, he lived 3 hours away from where I lived. I was in Indianapolis. He was in northern Indiana. So it was a bit of a trek to go to the funeral and all that. And as we were at the funeral, I turned around and my boss and his wife showed up. They drove 3 hours up just to show up and say now, they didn't know any of my family or anything like that. They just said, "We would just wanted to be here." I will never forget that, right?
Yeah.
That to
Yeah.
me was a stamp of integrity and compassion that goes above and beyond. I would have done anything for this guy
Yeah.
because he was such a compassionate human being, and
Mhm.
I knew he really cared about me.
Yeah.
So I think that compassion can be a powerful, powerful leadership trait because people want to know that you care.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Agreed.
So if they don't think you care about them personally or about their plight, they're not going to give you everything they've got.
Yeah. No,
They really aren't.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And getting to know people at that level again takes a lot of time and people don't want to invest that. But if you do invest it, it pays back tenfold.
Yeah, I have a story about my dad, and how he accomplished some Herculean things, which I won't share here, but it basically came down to the fact that he knew everybody who worked for them. He knew their kids, he knew their birthdays, he knew their spouses, and he really knew them.
Hmm.
And as a result, they saw him as a human being who they would go above and beyond for.
Yeah,
And it makes a big
absolutely.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the
So
next
getting,
trait that we should be looking at?
oh gosh, there are just so many. Do you have one that you want me to talk about? I think you have my book in
Let's
front of
see.
you.
I'm looking at your little chart here, and let's talk about character,
Ah,
which
character is a
kind of
good
goes
one.
into integrity and all that. But is this something even more focused?
I think character is something that every leader really needs if they want to be successful, if they want to be trusted, if they want to make an impact. So, character is what you do when people are looking and when people aren't looking. And a lot of people will try to show that they have character when there's an audience, when
Hmm.
they're on the big stage. But what do you do when you're not on stage? And that, of course, is important. It's about your own authenticity. It's about
Right.
how you show up at all times of the day or night. It's how you show up when you're not at work. Are you a different person when you're not at work? And what does that look like? Because people will see you in their communities and they'll see how you show up. So character is certainly something that's important to nonprofit leaders and how they develop trust in their teams and in their communities.
It's interesting when we talk about character. I'm in this, I speak to conferences and stuff, and I'm a member of the National Speakers Association. And I can tell you, there are speakers that are genuine. They go to your heart. You fall in love with them, and they really are who they are. Then there are other speakers who they get up on the platform and they come off as this persona. When they step off the stage, they are totally opposite.
Hmm.
And it really, it makes you jaded, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you feel that the wool has been pulled over your eyes. And I think that happens with leaders. If, they see that there are two sides to you, you certainly aren't trustworthy.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
What is your next favorite one?
Let's talk a little bit about courage. I think that's very appropriate to talk about in what's happening today. And this is just about leadership in general, not necessarily about mindful leadership. But courage really is needed as a leader. And again, some people just have this naturally. So it's really important to think about how you show up, how you stand up for others, even when the risk is great. I remember when I was in human services and I had a person die on my watch. It wasn't my direct fault, but it was somebody on my team who made a mistake, and the person lost their life. An incredibly scary moment. And in most organizations, people want a scapegoat. They want to have a reason. And I handed in my resignation. I had no idea how I was going to get another job. I had no idea, what the consequences were going to be for that. But somebody lost their life, and I felt deep responsibility for that. I don't know how many people would do that today.
Mm,
There are a lot of people who are seeing things being done, that is their responsibility because they're at the helm of the ship, and they do nothing except pass the blame on to somebody else. Courage is really, I think, important in today's leadership positions, and I don't think there's a lot of it. It's hard to gather courage. Again, many of us have this because it's a trait of ours, and it's hard to learn. Like, how do you learn courage? It's something that you're born with, but I think it's something that's really important. So as people go into leadership positions, thinking about what would you do if something happened and how would you have the courage to address it. Mine was drastic. By the way, they did not accept my resignation, which I was really glad about. But I didn't know that that would happen. But you think about today's leaders and the lack of courage for doing the right thing, and
right.
that's something that's important in all the sectors, not just the nonprofit sector.
And that kind of relates back to feeling safe where you are,
Yeah.
right? It's easy to be courageous if you feel safe with the leadership and they know that your intentions are honorable.
Hmm.
But so many people are threatened by honesty
Yeah.
that having the courage to speak truth to power or to do what you did, take responsibility for something that really wasn't your fault, but you were at the helm, that shows a lot of integrity, shows a lot of character. And as we're talking, I'm realizing these things are all interrelated.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You can't have one without the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
You really gotta have them all.
Yeah.
You can't have trust without honesty, without integrity, without character, and so it seems like these all kind of fit together. Is
Yeah.
there one or 2 others that you think kinda jump out there?
Let's talk a little bit about intuition because that's not something that's
Mm,
talked a lot about in leadership theory. Where this really comes back to, and he doesn't call it this, but it really goes back to Greenleaf's servant leadership, where he talks
mm,
about understanding what's right to do, having that gut feeling. He calls it foresight, like, I know this is going to happen. We need to go in this direction. But how many people do we know, Mark, that it's like, that doesn't feel right in my gut? I just don't think that's the right thing to do.
mm,
And when you listen to those people, much of the time they're correct.
yes,
So yeah, it might be getting on the woo-woo side for some, and for some of us, it's just experience. Like, I know when this
mm,
happens, this is going to be the outcome. But many of us have those gut feelings that we're not in a safe place, or this isn't the right decision, or I don't feel good
right.
about this. And I think we should listen to that. Again, that's not something that I can teach anybody. My intuition is not something that's strong, but I have worked with people on my teams who are like, I don't think we should go that way, Teresa. And gosh, they were right. So, kind of an interesting trait to have that, maybe people want to think about um,
Yeah.
as they as they practice their leadership skills.
Well, it's interesting because, I worked for a gentleman who founded and grew $100 million company, did business in about 90 foreign countries, and he did everything by instinct. and by intuition and by gut. And he would really frustrate the people who worked for him because they'd bring all these statistics and sales, figures and things like that. And if it didn't feel right to him, he didn't do it. And I had never seen anybody operate like that before, and it was so intriguing to me. But he trusted his own instinct and his own experience enough to say, "No, there's this is something we don't want to go into." And he would say, "I don't care how good the money looks. It's not right for us," right? And that that takes a lot of courage to do because,
Yeah, it does.
especially if everybody else is saying, "What are you, crazy?" You
Right.
just got a hunch. But no, I think you're right. I think that and of course, here's the litmus test, were they right or weren't they, right?
Right.
At
Right.
the end of the day. But these people who are instinctive and intuitive and go on their experience, they're usually right a large percentage of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's worth listening to. You don't always have to, but it's worth at least understanding that some people really do have strong feelings, and we should listen to why they think that way.
Now, does relationship building or those type is that a trait or is that something that you
It's
acquire
it's
later?
it's both. So we have natural inclination. So many of us are extroverted. We like talking with people. We like making those connections. We are networkers, and some of us are a natural at doing that. Many of us, though, have to learn that skill. So that's something that's a little bit easier. It might not be as easy for the person who needs to learn it, but certainly there are ways that we can say when you enter a room, when you meet a person, start asking about them, start talking about, where did they come from? Why are they here? What's their mission? All those types of questions that get people talking about themselves. So many people, when I teach them to network as young people, they'll go up to somebody and have no idea what to say. But that's a skill that you can learn. Now,
Yes.
how comfortable you feel with it, it takes a lot of practice to feel very comfortable with it. But most of us can figure out how to work a room. But some people are just natural at it. You just go up and you talk to everybody. Everybody's a friend. There's no strangers in some people's lives, where other people, really need to focus on, okay, I'm going to make a targeted effort to meet 5 people at this, event tonight, and trade cards or LinkedIn information, etc.
I think it's a great lesson as people building skills to realize that people's all people have so many different stories and so many different backgrounds that some of the most fascinating people are the people that don't look fascinating. And I always like to go up to people who are like standing in a corner, who are obviously introverts, who don't like going to these events. And I like to ask them about themselves, what are you doing here and what do you do? And I find that first of all, it relieves the pressure on me because now I don't have to talk about myself.
That's right.
But second of all, you find out that these people are just, I remember going to a conference at Harvard one time, and this has been years ago and it was in the 80s, and there was this room full of people, a lot of academics and a lot of, very important people. And there was this one gentleman who was probably in his 50s, maybe 60s. He was sitting in a corner, standing in a corner, drinking a glass of wine, just all by himself, and nobody was talking to him. Well, I didn't know anybody, so I thought, well, what the heck? I'll strike up a conversation. Well, come to find out, this guy was the founder of Atari. Now, for those of us who are from back in the day, Atari was a big, big deal back
It
in the
was.
80s,
Yeah.
right? It was a
Yeah,
big game
absolutely.
company, and he invented Atari. I mean, he was the founder of Atari. And we started talking about that, and I thought, if I hadn't taken the chance to ask him who he was and what he was doing there, I never would have known that this kind of resource existed. So I learned a lesson there that
Yeah.
you can't take people for granted. And you don't really have to be an extrovert. You can be an introvert and just ask a lot of good questions.
Well, an introvert, and you have to have courage, right? Because I
Yeah.
find it scares the heck out of people to go up to a stranger and introduce yourself. It gets better with practice, but the first few times takes a little bit of courage, which again goes back to that trait.
Well, especially if those people are introverts too, they probably welcome it
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
they're not used to being in those kinds of settings. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a great iconic book out there, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Right.
And you can there's still programs today that exist that can tell you, how to work a room and how to feel comfortable and how to gain those skills if it doesn't come naturally to you.
Well, I think we've talked a lot about traits. Now, traits are something that hopefully come naturally to us, but what about skills? How
Yeah,
about we start talking about that in part 3?
yeah. Sounds great.
Okay. Stay tuned. We'll be back with part 3 and talking about leadership skills.